This is a Noble Gold Investments alert. Gold has surged 46% in less than a year, doubling the gains of NASDAQ and S&P 500. Global reserves are shifting, exposing cracks in the monetary system. Investors are losing confidence in paper gold and demanding physical metal, creating a massive gap between gold owed and gold available. And you can profit from it. Right now, Noble Gold Investments has a limited supply of investment-grade gold bars and coins available. Smart investors are already moving into physical gold. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for you to do the same. And right now, when you make a qualified investment, Noble Gold will add a free 10th ounce gold coin to your order. Don't wait until it's too late. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com now. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Monday, April 21st, 2025, out of the Matrix into Prime Reality. Thank you for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Thank you, Ronnie, our wonderful moderator, for being here with us, and everyone who's joining us right now and, of course, later on in replay. I would love to talk about something that I think concerns a lot of people these days, and not talking about it, not going into the details of it, might cause confusion, isolation, and loneliness, all of the things that we actually don't really need. But the awakening, a clearly overused word by now, but it's overused, I think, because there's hardly any other word that describes so beautifully what is happening to many people. And before we go into the 5 big awakening traps that almost everyone experiences, so no judgment, but it helps to see the pitfalls. Before we go into that, I just want to quickly say what, in my perception, awakening really means. It is truly the coming to awareness that we are much more than we were programmed and made believe to be, and as a reflection of that this realm and everything we experience, that there's so much more to this and beyond than we were led to believe and programmed to believe. So I think, in general terms, that's what awakening means. But let's look at some of the biggest pitfalls here and some of the biggest traps maybe that people could fall into while going through this. Let's see where this is. Here we go. Pardon me. It's not quite. There you go. There we have it. So the first one, and this is something that we discuss often with people when we have this conversation, is that waking up means life gets easier. It's sort of, a misunderstood concept, but the reality is that awakening often begins with discomfort, not bliss. It's the collapse of illusions, materialism, false stories, identities, belief systems, and that can feel like grief, loss, or chaos. The real ease comes later through coherence. So there's this awakening usually happens in 2 stages, depending on which comes first. Can be either, but for some people have the experience of, the spiritual experience where they just through something or someone all of a sudden have the feeling that there's so much more to them than the body and their mind. There's just so much more all of a sudden, more intuition, a greater expansion. Or they look at the world, and they dig deeper and they go down rabbit holes, and that is a legitimate kind of awakening. And the first inclination is that, hey, now that we know more of the truth, clearly things must get easier. And that's usually not the case, because it's like you are waking up not only to the confusion outside or to the chaos outside, you're also waking up to all kinds of chaos programming, fear programming, lack programming, self-destruction programming, all the programs of our world and what we were taught. So I would say that rather than coming or going into this with the expectation that things are going to get easier, think of it as with every day, you are better equipped, you are in a better state, you have more tools to navigate the waters. So, life or the world or things might not necessarily get easier right away, but you are better equipped to go through it and you can see the illusions for what they are, which is very valuable, right? I'm often looking around me and how people fall apart with a small challenge. And clearly, it's because of all these limited beliefs that they're programmed with. And the waking up and the awakening literally helps you see that and see the bigger picture. And you know, it's just one challenge in the now. It's not something that lasts forever. And it isn't the big thing that the world makes it out to be. So, that's one of the traps. However, caveat here is that the longer that you're in it, um, the more that you expand, the more coherence happens inside of you. So you see, then your heart, your spirit, your mind, your thoughts begin to align more. Not always, but most of the time. And that makes you a much more powerful co creator in this realm, which means you're actually starting to create the things that you want in your life, more of them, anyways. And that makes life become definitely easier. The second trap is once you're awake, you're always awake. The reality is, awakening is not a one time event, it's a process. There are layers, many awaken to one truth, but not to others. You can be awake to spirituality, but be asleep to social programming, or vice versa. So, I really don't even want to use the term awake because we're hopefully all in the process of becoming. And the truth is also that there is always so much more to know. So, awakening to me is the commitment. It's the commitment to not fall for the trap where we go, oh, now I understand how this all works. I got it. I know it all. I know the deception. I know the conspiracy. I know the who, the where, the when. I'm fully aware now. And that usually only means that you stop, right? That you put a halt to it. And that's sort of a human, almost a human natural reaction. We sort of crave certainty. And in that, we sort of need things to be a solid, unshakable truth. And the truth is that as we are continually expanding and raising our consciousness and becoming more aware of things, that we also know that there are more layers, even behind what we thought was the end of the story. There's usually another layer, or two or three or four. We simply don't know. And committing to that certainty makes you sort of puts you in a stale position. You're just not moving forward any longer. So I would say that there is no such thing as awake, but there is such a thing as continually awakening. And it's a beautiful thing when we allow ourselves to continually explore further rather than settle on the truth. Like I said, our necessity for certainty makes it so. So, once again, what can we be certain of? We can be certain of our ability to continually awake. That's a beautiful thing to be certain of. We can be certain of our own intentions, directions, and actions. So we can have these certainties. But once we go to this is certainly what the truth is, this is who's to blame and this is who's innocent, this is the perpetrator, this is the victim. Story gets very confusing. So commit to the process of awakening rather than thinking you got it now. I've not met anyone who fits that description, by the way. And those who are usually expanding more and more are the ones who realize this. The third one, also a big one, especially if you're new to this process, which I want to say a big wave hit a lot of people at the end of 2019 and throughout 2020. That was a big awakening wave. And there was this clearly, now that I can see certain things, everyone else must be able to see them too. The reality is, awakening is often an isolating journey. Family and friends may reject your new awareness, but it isn't a sign to stop. This is your path to freedom, integrity, sovereignty, truth. And you can't measure it by how many people think the same way you do or how many people are willing to do the same things you're willing to do. Community is really something that is built from new states of awareness. In the awakening journey, it becomes more and more isolating, even if groups of people go through similar experiences. Most people just are looking for a bigger box. Let me explain this. Everybody is used to boxes. I belong to this religion, this political party, this culture, this ethnicity, this sports team, this music genre, whatever. Everybody has these identities. And once they can see that their current identity box is too small for who they are becoming, most people are not really willing to, release themselves from identity boxes altogether. They're just looking for a bigger box. And so when they find it, they sort of are looking for their group there. They're looking for their mascots, their flags, their everything. And then they stay there. But the true seeker and the true awakener, if you will, simply isn't satisfied, fulfilled with that any longer. It's a continuing journey. And you notice really quick that no matter how big the box, you don't fit in it. Because ultimately, your true being is unlimited. It doesn't know any boundaries. It can spread into infinity. Your true being can. And so you don't feel comfortable in boxes any longer. So we must acknowledge that the majority, at least historically speaking, the majority of people is not going to be on the same journey as you are. Folks are programmed very much so. We don't even know if the majority of people has the capability of going beyond it. They just simply might be backdrop people, NPCs, non-player characters, and they have their role in this reality, running the program through their avatars. That's it. You know, um, Sometimes, and this is more frustrating, we can feel the spark in our relatives, in our friends. We know it's there, but they want to push it down, don't acknowledge it. That can be frustrating. And one of the most frustrating things is to try to hold on to those people and try to keep it all up long, long beyond the expiration date of that friendship or relationship. And the truth is that if you continually rise and someone say stagnant, there's only so much um, overlap here. But the more you rise, and this is not, by the way, something like it makes you better, but the more you expand and rise, the less you'll have in common with that person. And so it gets harder and harder. And that is simply a choice people need to make. Do I want to stay here, or do I want to continually expand? Right. But the truth is that the expectation that others around us will also see things that we see and perceive the truth and be able to finally open their eyes to the things that are so obvious. Um, Frankly, as much as this was my hope, I've simply not seen any evidence of it. Clearly, the number of people today versus 15, 20 years ago is a lot bigger. The number of people willing to do that. Our reality has shifted enough also. The media, the new media, if you will, gives people more access to other information than mainstream, but it is and remains an inner choice for people to do that, and most simply don't want to, and they will not want to understand you. And there's this the last piece of this is really that people are holding on to their comfort zones, right? So that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. You might think that if you just show them enough evidence, they will clearly see the truth. But you must understand that they're in a hypnotic, in a programmed state. So the evidence doesn't mean anything to them. What is more real for them is that most people believe what they believe, and that makes it real. And if only a few people believe something else, even if they have the evidence on their side, it doesn't really mean much. So it is an uphill battle. And the truth is, you can't wake up anyone. You can only be the person you are, continually shine your light, continually expand as you do, and those who will get inspired by this, their journey will be unstoppable just as yours. And all the others, it's their choice. It's all a free will thing here. Another big one. This is a big triggering one. Awakening is all about light and positivity. Um that's the love and light brigade, as I call them. But the reality is you must face darkness within and without. Awakening is a spiritual awakening isn't spiritual bypassing. That's so important. We're going to get into that in a moment. It includes shadow work, inner alchemy, and courage to see the truth even when it's ugly. The light comes by going through the dark, not avoiding it. Um, this is one of the best created psychological operations in the entire spiritual truth, freedom, awakening community, if you will, is that there's this body of teachers and knowledge and books and movies and channels out there that are literally guilting and shaming people into only focus on positive thoughts. And they define what that means, by the way. They define what that positivity and what that light means. And it is neither authentic, nor is it truthful, nor is it honest. All the things that we need in the awakening journey. So then, when people listen to them and get programmed by them and almost hypnotized, they use all the spiritual practices and tools that they gathered, some of which are really good, to not strengthen their spirit, not strengthen their resolve to go through whatever needs to be gone through, but to try to go around it, right? I'm not going to look at this. If I don't look at it, it's not real and it will go away. And that's just not how it works. That is a huge, huge lie. And it is a lie created by ultimately, of course, the enemy that wants you in that state. And what happens to those people is they create a fear feedback loop. They're so afraid of looking at those negative things that by their energetic state of trying to avoid them, what do? They ultimately attract them, right? That's interesting, because what you really want to avoid, there's almost a magnetic force to that thing. So they see more of it, and they need to build bigger walls, not realizing just how much they're isolating their spirit from truth and authenticity. And the truth about this really is that our natural state of being does not require constant positive thinking. It doesn't require a reminder to be the light. Our natural state of being is that. So, what we do is we start by looking at the truth, accepting it, and then transmuting it into, for example, if you think about all the pains that you might have experienced in your life, the hurt, the rejections, or the abuse, when you try to pretend it didn't happen, that just becomes a bigger problem throughout life. When you're willing to finally accept that it happened, look at it, and oftentimes that requires help, by the way, but when you're willing to do that, you're actually willing to go through it ultimately once and for all, and you can then use the strength that this gives you to move forward in a much lighter and better and unburdened way. So it's always through it. It's never around it, above it, or below it. It's always through it. But this is what a lot of people in this greater community will tell you: only focus on the light, only focus on the positive. But what is positive? There's no greater positive than the truth. Now, do we linger, and do we just stick around, and do we just not ever try to get through it but just observe it? Well, that can be very troublesome. But the truth is, everything that we wish to transcend in our own lives or collectively, we must go through, acknowledge it, and find the real solution. And that can only be found when we define the problem correctly. So, this is true spiritual maturity. And I've never met anyone who has reached a certain level of consciousness or awareness who isn't fully committed to the truth. That's a powerful thing. The fifth and one of the biggest traps in the awakening journey that I've seen is now, there's all this energy from this awakening process. You see all the truths around you. Oh my goodness, something big, something huge must happen. The reality is the idea that awakening leads to an instant global shift can become a trap. Many expect the 5D ascension, solar flashes, earth shattering events to follow their own awakening. But this expectation often delays real lasting transformation. Awakening is not about waiting for the world to change, it's about changing your world moment by moment. And the interesting thing is that every generation, if you look back into those who were awakening maybe in the early 1900s, even late 1800s, and of course there were previous periods, almost every period had their moment where they thought clearly something earth-shattering now must happen. Because see, when you can see something so clearly, which you couldn't see before, it's only natural to think that the world now must shift. But the truth is, having been in this pretty much all my life, it doesn't work that way. Yes, shifts do happen, but they're subtle. They are sometimes more localized. They take time to take root, and they're not these huge events. But what this does, and it's also a narrative, it's a narrative that's out there, a very persistent one. The big thing is going to happen, either whether that's on the more political, conspiracy side. It's, oh, the white hats will have all these arrests, or they already had them. Gitmo, Q, Trump, Musk, all that. Or whether it's more on the spiritual side, that we will have the solar flash, the big solar event, or the geophysical event, or the reset, or the 5D ascension, or a combination of these things. And while I'm not saying that there isn't a truth to certain projections and outlooks into the future, it keeps people from actually doing the work. And awakening is the commitment to consistent active work, right? It's, you're shedding skin, you're shedding layers, and that requires like a clear intention. But there's a lot of people who are in the waiting stages. I have friends who, every time we would meet up, they would say, what do you think is going to happen in the next month or two? Sort of, is it the rapture? Is it the revelation? Is it a part of, and I was like, observing how it kept them from doing certain things or making certain decisions or simply living life. And that is neither healthy nor is it good. Because here's the thing, ultimately, do you think that you can affect this big event if it is that inevitable? Wouldn't it make more sense for you to continually show up for yourself and show up every day, and in the process help many others? Wouldn't it make more sense for you to commit to your own journey, your healing, your expansion, doing what's really in your heart, knowing what you came here to do, rather than waiting for some external event, Jesus, the solar flash, and all the other stuff that's out there, and just focusing on preparation for that? That puts you in a waiting position. It puts, and people spend 15, 20, 30 years in those waiting positions. Like I said, every group has their sort of their big event that they believe will come soon. And it was in the 60s, it was in the 70s, it was through the 80s, it was the UFO arrival, it's the disclosure. Something is always there. Something is always psyoped into our reality that keeps us more passive than active. And this is what these psyops are really supposed to do. They're supposed to capture your attention and keep it on these supposedly very, very soon, happening events, rather than focusing on your own journey. On the flip side of this, those who see through this are very much ahead of the curve, if you will, because they just keep showing up. And then they get their own clear intuition, whether there's some preparation that they need to take, or whether there's really something around the corner that might affect them. but then it isn't in an anticipation mode. It's just, oh, I got this intuition. I'm going to act on it. I'm going to take care of these things and move on. So, there's many more small traps, but these are sort of the bigger ones that almost everyone goes through, by the way. So, if you think, oh my goodness, I fell for it, everyone does. Come on, we're all human. We have a certain program that runs through us, a certain way we were programmed to think. And so don't give yourself a hard time about it, but be honest with yourself. Oh, that's me. I can now make a different choice. This is really what spiritual maturity to me is about. It's acknowledging that we have, had maybe erroneous ways of thinking, and now we're shifting. Now we are literally repenting in the non religious sense, where we acknowledge, oh, you know, I was maybe wrong about this, but here I am changing my heart, changing my mind, changing my direction. And that really is what a continual awakening is about. Also, think about it this way: you cannot see what you're not ready to see. So, sometimes we're sort of puzzled, how something could have been right in front of us for years and we couldn't see it. A truth that was so obvious now, but we couldn't see it until then. And it's sort of like your sight, literally your sight, and your spiritual sight keeps improving and expanding. So something that might have been in your reality all along, you couldn't see because you weren't ready to see it. It's kind of like, for those of you who take the same path, maybe you take the same road to work, to school, whatever, you've been driving down a road for many years. And for some reason, until one day, you never saw that one building or that one billboard or that one something that clearly was always there. You just couldn't see it. It's the same thing with the truth. We cannot rush these layers. We have to walk through them. We have to do the processing and then be ready for the next layer. And that goes for all of us. So even if someone were to sit down with you and sort of lay out the full truth for you, wouldn't matter. You couldn't really do anything with it because chances are you couldn't yet grasp the fullness of it. That's how it goes for almost all of us. The key issue or the key point is awakening is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a I arrived today. It's a continual process, and it's a rewarding one. And the when does life get easier? When does it feel better? Well, the more that we awaken, the higher our standards and principles also become. See, as long as we're ignorant of something, it's sort of easy to break one of those principles. But once we're not ignorant any longer, it's hard to do, and sort of the consequences, the inner consequences are bigger. In other words, we live a more self-responsible and self-regulating life. And that in and of itself is much more than most people can say. Most people live by the rules. If, and whatever the rules are, they will obey them as much as they need to get by. But a life that where you see truth and you see reality for what it is, or more of it, that puts your standards are much higher now. So yes, in a sense, life becomes easier because it doesn't begin here, it doesn't end here. You're not this body, you're not this mind. Your fear of death begins to subside. Your attachments begin to soften. Your attachments to this physical world and things and even people. You love them, but you're not clinging. You're not attached to them any longer. You love them for who they are, and you know that your journey with them is ultimately an infinite one, right? So, in that sense, life gets easier. But in terms of being in the matrix, that gets harder because you're still in this world. You still see mainstream society, you still see all of that happening, but you're now much clearer about what this really is. That gets harder. So you choose more. You decide whether you want to, expose yourself to certain things. You're probably going to be more picky with where you go to, who you spend time with, going into big crowds, malls, concerts, festivals, stuff like that, that all becomes more challenging. And I don't know for the foreseeable future if that's going to change, but that's just a part of it. And I for one, I don't believe in what some people talk about. It's also rosy and beautiful and unicorny and rainbowy. Not at all. But it's also not dark and gloomy and just bad. It's just the truth. And if you follow that principle, the principle of truth, you are on the best possible path you could be. And that's to me what awakening ultimately means. So, yeah, my friends, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here with us again today. Always a pleasure and an honor. And I will say this, the, one of the, in closing, one of the biggest factors um, in your journey is to establish a field. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you know how the consciousness field theory sort of works, it's not really a theory, is that you yourself create a field around you, and you could call this your biofield or your aura, but that field is a perfect 100% reflection of who you really are. So you can fake your words, you can fake your writing, you can fake a smile, you can fake a lotus pose, but you cannot fake your vibration. You cannot fake your frequency. And this is probably the best news also, because it is sort of like your consciousness fingerprint. So one of the most important things really is to intentionally create the field around you, because you're going to live in it all the time. And what creates higher fields? Well, the first thing is to look for the disturbances, right? Look for the things that pull you down, look for the things that seem to weaken you, the things that seem to disrupt you, and then start removing those things or neutralizing them, right? Whether that's frequency, whether that's devices or Wi-Fi routers, or find a way to mitigate those effects. Then look for maybe symbols in your, in your vicinity that seem to have a negative effect on you. Symbols have, because usually symbols are something that large groups of people have either prayed over, meditated on, or even just thought and fought about for a very long time. Symbols have huge energetic power. So you want to make sure that if you surround yourself with symbols, that they are actually feeding positively your field and not draining it. Um, and clearing, right? How do you clear a field? There's multiple ways to do this, and sometimes I would suggest that you get help, but there's clearly prayer, meditation. Yes, people call this woo-woo, but burning high quality, beautiful sage actually clears the field. So to me, that is very, very important. Cultivating your space intentionally, especially in in sort of the United States. People live on average in a house for 7 years. That's the average, and then they sell it. So most people don't look at houses that they buy or apartments that they buy or rent. They don't look at that as a permanent place, a home. They look at it as something temporary, and hence they treat it almost like that. But if you treat the space that you live in as your sacred space, if you treat it as your holy retreat, things begin to shift. And if you infuse it with your beauty, your love, but also in arranging it in a harmonious way. And that doesn't mean you have to spend money or a lot of money. It's more the intention, right? To make things coherent energetically. So that's highly important. And that clearly elevates your awakening journey. And last but not least, it's just my recommendation. and the recommendation of now thousands of our viewers, what really helps you in that journey and supports us every single day is the FLFE high consciousness field. It does all the things that I just said. It doesn't replace them, but it maintains a high consciousness field in your home at all times. It's like a spiritual heating system, if you will. It's beautiful. And for those of you who haven't tried it, if you go to highconsciousnessfield.com, you can give it a try for free. You don't need a credit card or anything like that. It's a completely free 15-day trial. It clears the negative energies and it elevates the field and keeps it there, which helps us in our awakening journeys, which helps us in our truth journeys, which supports us in everything. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. You know, we love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon. Your environment shapes everything, your thoughts, your health, your energy, but most people never question the invisible field they live in. We did, and that's when FLFE found us. It's not a product, it's a field of pure life force energy that lifts everything it touches. We now live in it 24/7, and we would love to invite you to experience it too. Start your free 15-day trial now. No pressure, no strings attached. Just the truth, resonance, and peace.